Hello, and welcome to the presentation on Trunk Highway 13 corridor evaluation and Dakota Avenue improvements in the city of Savage. My name is Carolyn Adamson, and I'm the MnDOT project manager with Highway 13 corridor vision in Savage and Burnsville, and improvements at the Dakota Avenue intersection. We recently provided an opportunity for people to review and weigh in on the environmental assessment for the Highway 13 corridor and Dakota Avenue improvements. And we wanted to provide an update on the project status and what will be happening between now and the end of 2021. This presentation will provide you with an overview of the project, the timeline, a brief review of the environmental work that we recently completed, next steps, and how you can stay connected and get updates on the project. This project has an overarching effort to define the transportation needs between 169 and Dakota Avenue. We need to complete an environmental assessment, as well as understand what is going on in the corridor and with the first construction project. The corridor footprint extends from 169 to Nicollet Avenue, just east of 35W. We want to look at access locations, potential future access locations, and current access locations, as well as how that access will be provided, whether it's at grade intersections, grade separation, or something else that we haven't seen a lot of. This will receive the same level of clearance from federal highways as a level 1 EIS, and it sets up the stage for future projects in the corridor that fit within this vision. Also within this process, we looked at the first construction project. And as you see on the screen, the first construction project is in orange, and it's the area around Dakota, Yosemite, and Vernon Avenues. This is the location of the ports, many of the ports of Savage, and provides direct access to the river. The tight diamond interchange has been the approved preferred alternative, and looking for construction in calendar year 2022 and 2023. There's many needs in the corridor of Highway 13, and if you drive this every day, this isn't something I need to tell you. Highway 13 exceeds its traffic capacity, has many intersections that have higher crash rates than what we normally see in similar intersections in the metro area, as well as it's not efficient or safe for trucks. With the number of trucks, high number of heavy vehicles that use this corridor, having a safe and efficient roadway is a priority. Pedestrians and bicyclists also don't have a lot of free movement throughout the corridor, and looking for opportunities where we can improve that. Right now, we are in late summer, early fall of 2021. This is something we've been working on since the fall of 2019. We've come out and talked to people in the public and businesses and had events to find out what the needs are over the course of calendar year 2019 and 2020. Since then, we haven't heard a lot from us, and that's what we've been doing in that time, is really taking all of that information, figuring out how to put it into a project, and providing you with the update that you have today. So right now we have completed the environmental document. We have held a hearing on that environmental document, as well as municipal consent there's been a hearing for municipal consent, and that has been approved. And so now we are looking at preparing plans for construction starting in the spring of 2022. And with that, I will turn this over to Angie Bursaw at Buttonhook, who's been working on this project.
Great, thanks, Carolyn. So I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about the corridor vision, or what we're calling the corridor footprint. This corridor footprint identifies where are we going to have access, and what type of access will that be? Primary, or what we call full movement access, where you can go all the way through, left, right, all the movements are accommodated, or something less than full movement, where we might have some restrictions in access, which is called the secondary access point. We also look at those accesses, what type of intersections could be accommodated. So we've looked at various options that keep the corridor at grade as some of it is today, or looking at options that grade separate, like interchanges or overpass bridges, or something in between where we have partial grade separation and partial at grade access. And we've also looked at local road improvement needs. Where do we need perhaps new frontage roads or improvement to local roads or new connections to make the transportation network work together for both the highway and the local system? Really, that all of those components which make up a future corridor vision and the footprint or sort of the outline of those future improvements were taken into an environmental process that Carolyn mentioned so that we can secure that environmental approval and streamline the corridor for future projects. So we're ready. We're a little bit further down the road and ready as projects become funded to go see other improvements built along Highway 13. We also, as we were working through this process, and I'll talk a little bit more about, wanted to make sure that we left flexibility for future packaging of different intersection types and combinations at these access points along Highway 13. So I want to first review our recommended access scenario. Again, this is in orange is showing our project area along Highway 13. So the project area from 169 all the way over to Nicollet Avenue on the east. I'll just orient you with some of what you're seeing on the screen here. The black circles are showing intersections or interchanges where we did not focus effort. We are not suggesting improvements at this time. So at 169, Highway 35W interchanges, although there may be improvements in the future, we were not looking at those in detail with this study. And then other intersections like Highway 13 and the County Highway 5 interchange, which recently have had improvements with new partial grade separation or new interchanges. Again, we assumed that those would remain as they are. So where we were focusing our efforts with potential improvements and study are the intersections shown in red and blue with the P's and the S's. So again, going back to our access scenario here, we're proposing primary access or full movement access at Dakota, Quinton, Chowan, and Nicollet Avenues. So full movements occurring at those intersections. And then secondary access, which could remain full access or could have some restrictions with our various options at Lynn Avenue and Washburn Avenue. And then you can also see on this graphic, we were studying various frontage road connections and local road improvements as shown in the dashes, both the red and the purple. So once we had our access scenario identified of where are we going to have different types of movements and what will those be, we then started to look at what would the intersection design be. And again, we looked at various scenarios. I mentioned some of these already of at grade, where we have that first top picture on the right-hand side is an example. It isn't along Highway 13, but it's an example of an at-grade high-capacity intersection where we have the movements accommodated, but perhaps it looks a little different than it does today. And then we have hybrid options, which have a mix of at-grade and grade separation elements, similar to what you might see today out at Highway 13, 101, along the corridor, where we have free flow movement on the eastbound Highway 13 and also free flow movement on the westbound movement, but we do still have an at-grade intersection under the bridge. And then we also considered freeway. What if this were a freeway in the future and we had full interchanges and full overpasses at all locations along the corridor? And what would that look like? So where we ended with our corridor footprint is we brought one corridor vision from each of these at-grade, hybrid, freeway, one or more, into our environmental document, really setting it up for the future to leave us with the most flexibility. And while this is not typical of how most corridor visions or environmental documents occur, it was important for us to leave as much flexibility as we could for the future, just due to the times we were in. Recognizing that we had a global pandemic happening, which left us with some uncertainty in traffic volumes, traffic patterns, and even funding. We wanted to make sure we brought options forward for environmental clearance that gave us, again, options for the future of what to actually fund and build. This also let us through this corridor footprint process led us to the recommendation for a grade separation at Dakota Avenue. And which is also our first construction project, which I'll talk a little bit about here in the future. But that decision for a grade separation at Dakota Avenue fits with any of these corridor designs at grade, hybrid, or freeway. And it also led us to move forward in the timeframe that we needed to for a 2022 project at Dakota Avenue. So we did a lot of public engagement with businesses and the general public and interested citizens, really going back to our start of our study in 2019 and all the way through March of 2021, looking at these various corridor footprint options. And we took probably 10 to 12 options out to those different groups. And here's a summary of some of what we heard. From Quinton to Washburn Avenue, we heard a lot of support for hybrid options that give both some at grade and some grade separated options. We heard some input about the at grade options, about concern from the freight community with traffic flow and how those movements would occur, but also recognizing some other benefits of just cost and ability to fund an improvement like that. And I would say that through this process, I have a slide a little bit further in the screen here, or in the slideshow, which talks about Dakota Avenue, and a lot of support, like I mentioned, for that grade separation to the ports area and the industrial businesses surrounding Dakota Avenue. And then I don't want to forget to mention Nicollet Avenue, which is on the far eastern side of our corridor. We also had 3 different options: at grade, hybrid, and freeway options at Nicollet Avenue, and heard a lot of support for improving that intersection, in particular for people walking and trying to access transit, that is, the transit stations that are on either side of that intersection. A lot of support for grade separating how people walk across that intersection so that they can do that other than at the traffic signal that's there today. And we also heard, similar to some of the other options, just the trade-offs and the benefits of the different options, and making sure that intersection can flow with little delay for both vehicles, transit, and pedestrians and bicyclists. So our corridor footprint time frame here is, we did bring those 3 different options into the environmental document. And the timing of future improvements for the corridor footprint, again, focusing really between Quinton Avenue and Nicollet Avenue, then will depend upon funding availability. We're one step further down the road with tier 1 clearance of environmental for this, which is great and sets the corridor up well for future funding and just agencies to kind of rally around the improvement and go make some things happen. The project team is currently working on an implementation plan, which identifies individual projects within that corridor footprint area and what should come first and how to sequence them and do that in an efficient and way that can be funded. So now I want to move to the first construction project and just do a little bit of catch up on the various options that we looked at, knowing that Dakota Avenue, as I mentioned, with the corridor footprint, it was agreed that would be a grade separated interchange. So we looked at multiple different interchange designs for this area between Dakota Avenue and Vernon Avenue. And really the 3 that sort of rose to the top that we shared publicly with our business community in the past was, I'm going to walk through each of them. So the first one is what we call a Buttonhook interchange design. And this design has Highway 13 going over Dakota Avenue. You can see that with the orange bridge that's shown here, and has a Buttonhook ramp design. So if someone, I'm going to kind of trace with my cursor here, was traveling eastbound on Highway 13, and wanted to access the ports area at Dakota Avenue, they would take this exit ramp shown in the dashed arrows, come down and use the south frontage road and loop back under Highway 13 to make that movement. This interchange design, along with most of our options, included a new frontage road connection, a north frontage road that would be fit between the highway and the rail corridor. So it's shown in this red dash and blue exit arrow here. As I get further into our presentation and talk about our preferred alternative, we did some refinements with exactly how those movements on that frontage road would work. But again, all of the interchange designs found value in adding that frontage road for connection, and then really focusing that main access right here at Dakota Avenue with ramps on and off the highway as shown in the blue dashes. Another option we looked at, our option 2, was called the tight diamond. So this is a more traditional interchange design with a diamond configuration for the interchange itself. So you can see here the exit ramp, again shown in dash, and the on-ramp shown in blue dashes. It still has Highway 13 going over Dakota Avenue, and then a north frontage road on the north side of Highway 13. Similar movements of how you get on and off Highway 13 westbound as the interchange design that I just walked through. And our third option was a little bit different of an option. This one is called the shifted Dakota overpass. And what this really does is it kind of changes what goes over and what goes under here. So this is showing Dakota Avenue actually being shifted through this frontage road connection here in red. And that would actually be an elevated frontage road bringing you up so that you can access over Highway 13 to the north side, and then utilize the frontage road, down in either direction to get back to grade. This option was looked at as, just a different way to think about it. It does require shifting that Dakota Avenue access, as I mentioned, and then the on and off ramps from Highway 13 are pretty similar to the other options that I reviewed. So we took those 3 options out to a virtual open house in October 2020. That was more focused on, should we grade separate Dakota Avenue or should it be at grade? And once a decision was made to grade separate, we then had more specific meetings with businesses around this area and along Highway 13 to look at the various interchange designs. And we heard a lot of support for grade separating this option. There's just a lot of freight traffic in and out, and that conflicts with the commuter traffic on Highway 13. And anytime you're mixing heavy truck volumes with vehicles is, a situation you want to make sure is very safe for those movements. So there was a lot of support for grade separating this location. And there was also a lot of support for the tight diamond design, that option 2. People really liked, especially the freight business in the Ports of Savage area, having a frontage road with all of the design options. And just talking about some of the pros and cons with the different interchange options, realizing that the more we can minimize how trucks need to speed up and slow down and make turns, the better with the various options. So there was some concern with the Buttonhook option, that first option I talked about, just because it would require a few additional turns for heavy trucks. And also the Dakota Avenue overpass, where we're shifting Dakota Avenue and taking that over Highway 13, just realizing trucks would need to slow down and then accelerate to go up and over Highway 13 before having to decelerate again, which just added some complexity to their movements. So we took all of that input really into consideration as we were doing our technical analysis. And our evaluation of the different interchange designs looks at not only how does it work from an operations and safety standpoint, but really how's it going to work for those using it most, and that business input that I mentioned. So this slide shows all of the different features that we were looking at when we compared our 3 interchange designs. So it included operations and safety, as I mentioned, how trucks are stored, realizing we have heavy movements at particular times of the year where there's a lot of truck activity, and how do we safely allow those trucks to store up and queue as they're waiting to make their movements through and into the ports area and the businesses on the south side of Highway 13. We also had to take into consideration the railroad and how we fit designs both on Highway 13, where we have the railroad bridge that crosses over Highway 13, but also the rail as it's located parallel to the corridor, and how we cross that rail corridor into the Ports of Savage area. Constructability is always another thought. We have a lot of vehicles on Highway 13 and needing to get in and out of these businesses. And how would this work as we think about how it gets constructed? We also heard from the business community, visibility is important, and what do these various designs do in terms of screening their people's ability to see a business from the highway corridor. And then just the general footprint. What's the right-of-way impact? How much right-of-way? Can we fit this within what we have today, or do we need some additional right-of-way? So as you can see by the check marks on the screen, that option 2, the tight diamond design, really kind of hit the spot on all of our evaluation measures, both technically and with public input. Which led us then to bringing into the environmental documents a preferred alternative of the tight diamond interchange. And this graphic looks a little bit different than the one you saw before, and mainly just through that public input process of how can we make this better, and what do we need to think about from a business and corridor use perspective. So really the main differences here are just showing some clarity on the north frontage road and what would be a two-way design, so traffic traveling in both directions. We would have that in the red dashes here between Dakota Avenue and Yosemite Avenue. And then where would we actually have just a one-way frontage road? And I'll explain that a little bit. As you're traveling westbound from Highway 13, this exit ramp that would get you off the highway to access the Ports of Savage area would actually fit between one of the portals on that bridge, the railroad bridge that goes over Highway 13. So we're not impacting the rail bridge that's there today. That will remain across Highway 13. It is used by the rail company, and it also is part of a historic rail property. So we are leaving that in place, but fitting this exit ramp in between the piers of that rail bridge, and then making this a one-way frontage road. So you'd be able to access Vernon Avenue, and Vernon would be able to have access to Yosemite back over to Dakota with the two-way function here. The other components of this design have remained the same. And again, this is the preferred alternative brought into the environmental document. So once we had a preferred alternative, we have then since been working on construction staging. How could this be built? How would we keep traffic moving on Highway 13? Would there need to be detours? What do we need to consider? And as we were working through that process, we had 3 different construction staging scenarios that we looked at, and I'm going to walk through each of them. So the first one is considered what we called it the 4-lane crossing scenario. So this would keep traffic moving on Highway 13 in both directions, 2 lanes in each direction, but would rely on the south frontage road for connection to the businesses, and then have 2 crossing points where you could get across Highway 13, not left onto the highway as mentioned here in the graphic, but across the corridor. As is noted on the screen here, this option was ruled out fairly early in our analysis, just due to some of the concerns with signal coordination with the rail corridor and in general their railroad operations, and our quick timeline, knowing that we have a 2022 project, it would take a lot of coordination to try to make this option work, and would not occur within the timeline to allow us to start construction in 2022. So this option was reviewed, but was dismissed from further consideration. So the second scenario that we looked at was full closure of Highway 13. So sort of the other end of the spectrum of staging scenarios here. And this is an option that we typically look at because it does allow us to move construction more quickly, get it done in a quicker timeline, but it does come with some trade-offs. And the trade-off here would obviously be regional detours for those moving through regional traffic moving through the area, and relying on local streets like 126 and the South Frontage Road for business access to this area. This was reviewed, but it was recommended to be dismissed from further consideration just due to the challenges of, and really from our business input, that this would be a big challenge for the businesses along this area, and also from our agencies. There was also a lack of support for this option from our local communities and agencies, even including MnDOT, with considering other regional transportation projects in the area and detours and the impact that this could have on the region. So again, this option was not considered moving forward. The third scenario is the Highway 13 two-lane pipeline option. And this one actually is the recommended construction staging scenario that we're moving forward with at this time. What this does is it leaves one direction of travel open in either direction of Highway 13 and reduces any access in this area. So we wouldn't have direct access to the highway, but it would rely on the U-turn locations that are shown on either side here for movements sort of on and off and to change direction. So this option was found to be really the most responsive to business needs and also to keep traffic flowing, realizing, however, that there will be delays on Highway 13. This will impact how traffic moves through the area. At some points during their construction, there may be the need for some short-term closures, which would require a detour. Those will try to occur at times that are not in peak hours and least disruptive. However, we're working through, where else will the traffic go, and how do we mitigate or improve the flow where traffic will end up going. So again, Highway 13 will remain open. It just will have delays due to construction in this area. So as I kind of alluded to already, once we picked a general construction staging scenario, now we're working on the details of what does that actually mean? Where else are we doing what we call mitigation strategies, where we might need a temporary signal or additional traffic control to make sure traffic can move safely, whether it's on the highway or on some of the local streets or county roads. And where do we need to make those improvements? So we're working on that right now, and we do anticipate holding a fall open house where we'll review those, the full traffic management plan and construction details and schedule. So again, just a high-level summary of our Dakota Avenue construction activities. As Carolyn mentioned, we are anticipating that this project starts in the spring of 2022. The general, how long is this going to take and how will it be built in stages? That's what we're working on, and we plan to share at our fall open house, along with any traffic impacts. And there's some information on the screen here, which we'll repeat at the end and is available on the project website of how to stay updated. You can sign up on the website for project email updates and attend one of our meetings coming up. Turn it back over to Carolyn to recap our next steps.
Thank you, Angie. After we did the review of the design concept, the next step was to do an environmental assessment. And what is an environmental assessment? It's a document that's required by federal law where projects and agencies that are starting projects need to identify the impacts to the natural and human environment of upcoming projects. This considers many things such as the need for the improvement, the alternatives that are going to be considered, the environmental impacts and mitigation, as well as the agency coordination and public involvement. So there's a lot of coordination between the federal agencies and state level agencies. This was completed over the last year and a half, and was published for a public comment period in June and July, with a hearing being held on June 28th. The draft document is available on our website. When that draft is finalized, then the final copy will be posted in the same location. This EA is unique compared to most EAs that are completed for construction projects in that it is a hybrid EA. A hybrid EA means that we consider both the corridor footprint, which is done on the assumption that everything that we could possibly touch within the corridor would be impacted in some way, versus the first construction project where we have construction limits and know what the impacts are going to be and where they're at. This then leads to clearance from FHWA for construction for the corridor or for the first construction project, as well as an agreement on we've done our due diligence to get to this point on the rest of the corridor footprint. When doing an environmental assessment, you have to consider many social and economic environmental impacts, and those are shown on the screen. And generally speaking, those are to impacts to the vegetation and the wildlife in the area, how the water flows, including in this location, there's the fen, the Savage Fen, and it has really unique hydrology and how that operates, the community impacts, the construction impacts, as Angie outlined. There's a lot of impacts when we do go through construction, as well as any other areas of concern. You know, is there contamination in the area? Is there right of way that we're going to impact? Is there going to be changes to air quality? And this document is a summary of all of that review and work that we've done. And at this point, I want to talk about the next steps. So at this point, we have done the draft document. We've received public comment and agency comment, and are putting together what is called a decision on finding of no significant impact, or FONSI, that would then go to FHWA for further evaluation, and hope to have that back by the end of September. This fall, we will have the first construction project open house where we'll talk about those construction impacts and what's happening. And then in spring in 22, the construction project will begin. If you would like to stay updated on the project, you can find updates on our website, as well as sign up for email updates. And this is really a good way to get updates. We will continue using this email list through construction. So if there's something that comes up, we will send that out to the email list. If you have a community organization or business that's in the area that you would like us to come and talk to your business, please let us know, and we can do some virtual presentations or combine them with a few others that we have going on coming up. And if you have other questions that aren't covered, please feel free to reach out to my colleague, Michael Corbett, and he will direct your email or your questions accordingly. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time today. We're very excited to get this project going and started, and getting construction started next year, and hope this answered any questions you have, and have a great day. Thank you.